The sun rose over the small village just outside the grand kingdom of Zalanga, casting golden light over the simple mud-brick homes and bustling market. Among the villagers was Nia, a hard-working young woman who had spent most of her life under the harsh rule of her stepmother, Mama Zara. Ever since her father passed away, Nia had been treated more like a servant than a daughter. Despite this, she remained kind and hopeful, always believing that life had better things in store for her. Her marriage to Malik had been arranged by Mama Zara, who constantly reminded her how lucky she was to have a husband, even if he was, in her words, a nobody. Malik was a quiet, humble craftsman who made a living carving wooden furniture and repairing tools for the villagers. He was a man of few words, but carried himself with a quiet strength that Nia found comforting. Though they didn't share a grand love story, like in the tales told by the elders, Malik treated her with kindness and respect, something Nia deeply appreciated. Mama Zara, however, saw no value in him. She often ridiculed Malik in front of others, calling him a fool who would never amount to anything. Whenever he left for work in the mornings, she would shake her head disapprovingly and tell Nia that she should have married a wealthier man. Nia never responded to these comments, though deep down, they hurt her. She knew Malik worked hard and never once complained about their simple life. To her, that meant more than riches. Despite her contentment, there were times when Nia wondered about Malik's past. He never spoke about his family, where he came from, or why he had settled in their village. Unlike the other men in the village, he carried himself with a certain grace, as if he had once lived among nobility. His hands, though rough from labor, bore the faintest traces of a life that did not always involve hard work. There were also moments when he seemed lost in thought, his eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting someone or something to appear. One evening, after dinner, Nia noticed Malik sitting outside their small home, staring at the night sky. The flickering oil lamp beside him cast shadows on his face, making him look almost like a different person. She hesitated before stepping forward. "Malik," she said softly, sitting beside him. "You never talk about your past. Where did you live before coming here?" Malik's jaw tightened slightly, and for a moment he looked as if he might answer. But then, just as quickly, the expression vanished, replaced by the same gentle look he always gave her. "It doesn't matter," he said. "What matters is that I am here now, with you." Though his words were reassuring, Nia couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something he wasn't telling her. And soon, the small, peaceful life they had built would be shaken in ways she could never have imagined. The night was quiet, but Malik could not sleep. As he lay beside Nia, listening to her soft, steady breathing, memories of a past life flooded his mind, memories he had tried to bury for years. He had not always been a simple craftsman. Once, he had been Prince Malik of Zalanga, the only son of King Harun and Queen Aisha. As a child, he had lived in the grand palace, surrounded by luxury and the constant teachings of what it meant to be a ruler. His father was a just and beloved king, always ensuring his people were protected and cared for. But power breeds enemies, and in the shadows lurked one who desired the throne for himself, King Zuberi, Malik's uncle. Malik was only 12 when the betrayal took place. One night, the palace was stormed by Zuberi's soldiers. The sound of clashing swords and terrified screams echoed through the halls as fire consumed parts of the palace. Malik had tried to reach his parents, but before he could, Tariq, his father's most trusted guard, had grabbed him. "You must leave," Tariq had whispered urgently, his grip firm but gentle. "Your father is gone. Your mother." His voice had faltered, and Malik had understood the truth in that silence. His heart had broken that night, but there had been no time for mourning. Tariq had led him through secret tunnels beneath the palace, out into the dark forests beyond the kingdom's borders. They had travelled for weeks, disguising themselves as simple travellers. Malik, once a prince, was forced to learn how to live as a commoner. With each passing day, his royal identity faded, replaced by the quiet, humble man he had become. He had taken on the life of a craftsman, blending into the villages, always moving, always hiding. He had built a new life in Nia's village, believing that perhaps he could finally be at peace. But he had never forgotten who he was. More importantly, he had never forgotten the danger that lurked beyond the kingdom's borders. If Zuberi ever learned that he was alive, he would stop at nothing to kill him. And now, with whispers of rebellion growing and Zuberi's soldiers searching villages, Malik knew that his past was catching up with him. He could not run forever. But the one thing that terrified him the most was not losing his own life. It was what would happen to Nia if the truth was ever discovered. Life in the village continued as it always had, but Nia began to notice things about Malik that she had never questioned before. They were small at first, little details that seemed unimportant on their own but, when pieced together, formed a mystery she couldn't ignore. One day, while helping a merchant count his goods in the market, Nia watched as Malik casually glanced over the traders list and corrected an error. Most villagers could barely read, yet Malik had done it effortlessly, without hesitation. The merchant had laughed and thanked him, but Nia had stood there, staring. How had he learned to read so well? Then there were the languages. When travelers passed through their village, Malik always seemed to understand them, whether they spoke the common tongue, the dialects of distant tribes, or even the refined speech of Zalanga's nobles. Once, a merchant from Zalanga had visited, speaking in the kingdom's formal court language, a dialect unfamiliar to most villagers. Yet Malik had responded flawlessly, his accent crisp and clear. The merchant had looked surprised but said nothing, while Nia had felt a strange unease settle in her chest. It wasn't just his knowledge that unsettled her, it was how he reacted to certain things. Whenever news from Zalanga arrived, Malik would stiffen. He never spoke about the kingdom, but Nia had noticed how his grip tightened around his tools whenever soldiers passed through, how his expression darkened at the mention of King Zuberi. One evening, while cleaning their home, Nia found something tucked beneath a loose floorboard. A royal seal, bearing the crest of Zalanga. She had seen similar symbols before on official documents and the uniforms of passing noblemen. Confused, she traced her fingers over the intricate design, a wave of unease washing over her. That night, when Malik returned, she confronted him. "Malik, what is this?" she asked, holding up the seal. For the briefest moment, she saw something flash across his face. Shock, fear, hesitation. But just as quickly, he masked it. "It's nothing," he said, taking it from her hands. "Just an old trinket." "But why do you have it?" "It doesn't matter," he said firmly, tucking it away. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made her stomach twist. The next morning, Mama Zara scoffed at Malik as he passed by. "That man walks around like he's royalty," she muttered. "As if he's better than the rest of us." Nia forced a smile, but inside, doubt gnawed at her. Who was Malik, really? In the grand palace of Zalanga, King Zuberi sat upon his gilded throne, his sharp eyes scanning the trembling messenger before him. The man had travelled from a distant village, bringing whispers that unsettled the ruthless king. "There are rumours, my lord," the messenger said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some say the true heir still lives." Zuberi's fingers tightened around the golden armrest of his throne. For years he had ruled with an iron grip, ensuring that any threat to his crown was eliminated. He had killed his own brother, Malik's father, to seize power. And though he had been certain that the boy had perished that night, the mere suggestion that he was alive sent a ripple of unease through him. "If this is true," Zuberi said coldly, "then he must be found. Double the patrols. Search every village. No one is to speak of this heir again." That very night, Malik's old friend, Tariq, arrived in the village under the cover of darkness. Hooded and cautious, he slipped into Malik's home, his face lined with urgency. Malik, upon seeing him, immediately tensed. It had been years since they had last spoken, but he could tell from Tariq's expression that the past was catching up with them. "You're in danger," Tariq whispered. "Zuberi has heard the rumors. He's searching for you. You must act before he does." Malik's jaw clenched. He had spent years hiding, building a quiet life with Nia, hoping the past would never find him. But deep down, he had always known that this moment would come. Unbeknownst to them, Nia had overheard part of their conversation. She had woken in the middle of the night, only to find Malik speaking in hushed, urgent tones with a stranger. Hidden in the shadows, she caught fragments of their words. "Danger. Searching for you. Act before he does." A sinking feeling settled in her chest. Malik was hiding something, and now, more than ever, she was certain it was something dangerous. Her mind raced. Was he involved in something illegal? Was he being hunted for a crime? She clutched her hands together, fear creeping into her heart. The man she had married was still a stranger to her, and now she wasn't sure if she could trust him. For days, Nia wrestled with the growing doubt in her heart. She had always trusted Malik, always believed in the quiet strength of their bond. But now, that trust was unraveling, piece by piece. The secrecy, the whispers in the dark, the tension in his voice, everything pointed to something far bigger than she had ever imagined. One evening, as Malik returned home, she could no longer hold back. He barely had time to close the door before she confronted him. "Who are you, Malik?" Her voice trembled, but there was fire in her eyes. "You keep secrets from me. You speak in riddles. And now, strange men come in the night, warning you of danger." Malik froze. He had been preparing for this moment, but now that it had arrived, he didn't know what to say. He could see the pain in her eyes, the way she searched his face for answers. "It's not what you think," he said carefully. "Then tell me the truth," she demanded. He hesitated. How could he tell her? How could he burden her with the truth of who he really was, of the danger that would come for them both if anyone discovered it? "You have to trust me," he finally said. "I can't explain, but I swear to you, I would never put you in harm's way." But that wasn't enough. Nia's heart ached at the walls he kept between them. Later that night, Mama Zara's voice echoed her deepest fears. "You should leave him, Nia," she said, her tone laced with suspicion. "That man is hiding something dangerous. Men like him bring nothing but trouble." Nia wanted to defend him. She wanted to believe in the man she had married. But what if Mama Zara was right? What if Malik's secrets put them all in danger? Meanwhile, Malik sat alone outside, staring into the darkness. He could feel the weight of Nia's doubts, the way she was slipping away from him. He wanted to tell her everything, to explain why he had hidden the truth for so long. But if she knew, Zuberi would come for her too, and Malik would rather lose her trust than lose her life. The night was still when the first screams shattered the silence. Nia jolted awake, heart pounding. Smoke filled the air, the distant glow of fire creeping through the village. Outside, the sound of clashing swords and desperate cries sent a shiver of terror down her spine. Zuberi's soldiers had come. Malik was already on his feet, grabbing Nia's wrist. "We have to go, now!" he urged, his voice firm but calm. Before they could move, the door burst open. Armed soldiers stormed inside, their torches casting flickering shadows across the walls. "Search the house," one of them barked. "The traitor could be here." Nia barely had time to react before Malik moved like lightning. He snatched a fallen soldier's sword, his body shifting into a stance that was nothing like the humble craftsman she knew. With quick, precise movements, he disarmed one attacker, striking another in the chest with the hilt. He fought like a warrior. Nia's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen him like this. Swift, ruthless, moving with a skill that no ordinary villager possessed. Who was this man? The soldiers hesitated, clearly underestimating him. But just as Malik prepared to strike again, more men flooded into their home. There were too many. A sharp whistle cut through the air, and suddenly, Tariq emerged from the shadows, cutting down a soldier before grabbing Malik's arm. "We have to go." Malik hesitated. He didn't want to leave Nia behind, but there was no time. Grabbing her hand, he pulled her through the back door, dodging flames and fallen villagers. Behind them, the soldiers rounded up captives, dragging them toward the village center. The three of them ran, slipping into the dense forests beyond the village. Only when they were deep within the cover of the towering trees did they finally stop. Panting, Nia yanked her hand free from Malik's grip. "Enough," she said, her voice shaking. "I saw you fight, Malik. No craftsman fights like that." Malik remained silent. "Who are you?" she demanded, her eyes blazing with hurt and confusion. "And why are they hunting you?" This time, he couldn't run from the truth. The forest was eerily silent, except for Nia's sharp, uneven breaths. She had demanded answers, and now Malik could no longer hide the truth. He took a slow step toward her, his expression heavy with regret. "I should have told you sooner," he said softly, "but I needed to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" she shot back, arms crossed tightly. "Who are you really, Malik?" He took a deep breath, then met her gaze. "My full name is Malik Harun ibn Aisha. I am the rightful heir to the throne of Zalanga, the true king." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Nia's heart pounded as she tried to process what he had just said. The true king. Malik continued, his voice steady despite the weight of his confession. "King Zuberi killed my father. He stole my kingdom. I was barely a boy when I fled, forced to live in hiding while my uncle ruled with cruelty. I have spent my life running, waiting for the right time to return." Nia swallowed hard. It felt as if the ground beneath her had shifted. The man she had married, the quiet, humble craftsman she thought she knew, wasn't just any man. He was a prince, a king, the rightful ruler of Zalanga. "You lied to me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "All these years, you never told me." Malik flinched but held his ground. "I didn't lie. I just never told you the full truth. I wanted to keep you away from this. If Zuberi knew I was alive, he would stop at nothing to kill me, and anyone close to me." Nia turned away, her mind racing. The betrayal stung, yet beneath her anger was something else. Awe. The man who had worked beside her, who had built a simple life with her, was not a simple man at all. He was a warrior, a leader, a king who had sacrificed his birthright to protect the people he loved. She closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. So what happens now? Malik's jaw tightened. Now. I stop running. For the first time since the attack, Nia truly saw him, not just as her husband, but as the man he was meant to be. And she realized that her life would never be the same again. The morning air was crisp as Malik, Nia and Tariq prepared to leave the forest behind. There was no turning back now. The time had come for Malik to reclaim what was rightfully his. Standing at the edge of the trees, he gazed toward the distant kingdom of Zalanga, its grand palace barely visible beyond the rolling hills. "Zuberi will never stop hunting me," he said, his voice firm. "So I must stop him first." Nia watched him, her heart torn. She had spent days wrestling with the truth. Her husband was not just Malik, but a king in exile. And now, he was marching toward a battle that could change their lives forever. Tariq tightened the strap of his sword. "The journey will be dangerous. Zuberi's spies are everywhere. If we're caught before we reach Zalanga, we won't make it to the gates alive." Malik nodded. "Then we move carefully." Nia hesitated. She had spent her whole life in a small village, never dreaming of war, of kingdoms, of a life beyond her simple world. But now, everything had changed. "You should stay here," Malik said gently, turning to her. "This fight, it's not yours to bear." His words stung, but not because they were untrue, because deep down, she had already made her choice. Nia lifted her chin, determination flashing in her eyes. "You're wrong. This is my fight too. I may not be a warrior, but I won't let you face this alone." Malik searched her face, seeing the unwavering resolve in her expression. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Then, we do this together." As they travelled, the road to Zalanga tested them at every turn. They crossed rivers with dangerous currents, evaded Zuberi's patrols, and slept under the stars, always on edge. Nia learned quickly how to move unseen, how to defend herself, how to survive. Tariq, seeing her determination, began training her. "A queen must know how to fight," he said with a smirk, tossing her a wooden dagger. "I'm not a queen," Nia muttered, catching it. "Not yet," he replied. With each passing day, she grew stronger, not just in skill, but in heart. She no longer followed Malik because of duty or fear. She stayed because she loved him, not as a king, but as the man he had always been. The journey had been long and grueling, but at last, Malik, Nia, and Tariq stood before the hidden rebel stronghold, a secret encampment deep in the mountains, far from Zuberi's reach. As they entered, dozens of wary eyes turned toward them. The rebels, hardened by years of oppression, studied Malik with suspicion. Many had heard whispers of the lost prince, but after so many years, hope had faded into doubt. A tall man stepped forward, his arms crossed. "You expect us to believe you are the rightful king?" His voice was laced with disbelief. "We've heard this story before. Many have claimed to be the lost heir." Malik met his gaze, unflinching. "Then let me prove it," he said. He spoke of Zalanga's history, of the secret tunnels beneath the palace, of the traditions only a true-born royal would know. He described the night his father was murdered, the way he fled as a child, and how he had lived in exile ever since. A murmur spread through the camp. Some looked convinced, others skeptical. "Words are not enough," an older rebel woman said. "We need more than a prince. We need a leader who can win." Before Malik could respond, Nia stepped forward. "Then you should know this," she said boldly. "We didn't just come here to reclaim a throne. We came to free Zalanga. Malik is not asking for blind loyalty. He is asking you to fight with him, to take back what Zuberi stole from you, from all of us." The rebels exchanged glances. They had expected a frightened wife, a powerless queen-to-be. Instead, they saw a woman who stood beside her husband as an equal. A younger rebel, a woman named Asha, stepped closer to Nia. "And what of you?" she asked. "Are you ready to fight for him?" Nia held her gaze. "I've been fighting for him since the day I met him." A tense silence hung over the camp. Then finally, the tall man who had doubted Malik gave a slow nod. "Perhaps you are more than just stories," he admitted. Tariq stepped forward, unrolling a map of the palace. "We have a plan," he said. "If we work together, we can take Zuberi down." That night, under flickering torchlight, the rebellion began. The night was thick with tension as Malik and his rebels moved silently through the palace's hidden tunnels. The air smelled of damp stone, and every step felt heavier with the weight of what was to come. This was it, the final stand against Zuberi. They had planned every move carefully. Tariq led a group to disable the palace guards, while Nia and Asha infiltrated the servants' quarters, spreading false orders to confuse Zuberi's men. Meanwhile, Malik and his warriors crept toward the throne room, prepared for the battle that awaited them. As they emerged from the tunnels, chaos exploded. Rebels clashed with palace guards, steel against steel, shouts echoing through the halls. Flames flickered from torches knocked aside, casting wild shadows over the battlefield. Nia moved swiftly through the palace corridors, her mind sharp, her heart steady. She had memorized every detail of the palace's layout from Malik's stories. Using this knowledge, she sent enemy reinforcements in the wrong direction, turning the tide of battle in their favor. Malik fought like a man possessed, cutting through the ranks of Zuberi's soldiers with precision. His presence alone sent fear through their ranks. After years of tyranny, the true king had returned. At last, the throne room doors burst open. Zuberi stood at the top of the grand staircase, dressed in royal gold, his sword gleaming. "So," he sneered, "the lost prince dares return." Malik stepped forward, his grip tightening on his blade. "Your reign ends tonight." The room held its breath as the two kings faced each other. Zuberi struck first, his sword a blur of deadly precision. Malik dodged, countering with a powerful swing. Blades clashed, sparks flying, each strike carrying the weight of years lost to exile. Zuberi was strong, but Malik was faster, sharper, fueled by justice and vengeance. Blow after blow, the fight raged on. Then, with one final decisive movement, Malik disarmed Zuberi, sending his sword clattering to the marble floor. The usurper fell to his knees, defeated. The rebels stormed the throne room, cheering. Tariq secured the guards, while Nia stood at Malik's side, her eyes filled with pride. Malik turned to the people who had fought for him, his voice steady. "Zuberi's rule is over. Zalanga belongs to its people once more." And as dawn broke over the palace, the true king took his rightful place upon the throne. The sun rose over Zalanga, casting golden light across the palace walls. The battle was won, but for Nia, the real challenge was only beginning. She stood at the edge of the royal balcony, looking down at the city below. The people cheered Malik's name, celebrating the return of their true king. But whispers of another name travelled through the crowd. Hers. Queen Nia. The words felt strange, almost unreal. Just weeks ago, she had been a simple village girl, working tirelessly under her stepmother's sharp tongue. Now, she stood in a palace, wearing royal robes, with the weight of an entire kingdom on her shoulders. She turned to see Malik watching her, concern in his eyes. "You haven't said much since last night," he noted. Nia exhaled, "Because I don't know what to say." She gestured to the grand halls around them. "This isn't my world, Malik. I don't know how to be a queen." He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "You don't have to be anything but yourself, Nia. You're strong, wise, and brave. That's why the people will follow you." But doubt still gnawed at her. How could she lead a kingdom when she had never even dreamed of such power? Days passed, and Nia watched as Malik handled the affairs of the kingdom, rebuilding the city, restoring order, addressing the people. At first she felt like an outsider, uncertain of her place. But then, she noticed things others overlooked: the hungry children in the streets, the wounded soldiers left without care, the frightened villagers who had suffered under Zuberi's rule. She couldn't stand by and do nothing. Determined, she gathered a group of healers and began organizing relief efforts. She visited the wounded, listened to the concerns of the people, and ensured that food was distributed fairly. The more she worked, the more the people embraced her, not just as Malik's wife, but as a leader in her own right. One evening, after a long day in the city, she returned to the palace, exhausted but fulfilled. Malik greeted her with a proud smile. "You're doing more than you realize, Nia," he said. "The people don't just see me as their king, they see you as their queen." And for the first time, she believed it. She was not just a village girl anymore. She was Nia, Queen of Zalanga. The grand hall of the palace was filled with the sound of drums, the scent of fresh flowers, and the excited murmurs of the people. It was a day Zalanga would never forget. The day their true king returned to the throne, and the day Nia, the village girl who had once been overlooked, became their queen. Dressed in regal gold and deep crimson, Malik stood tall as the royal priest placed the crown upon his head. "Long live King Malik!" the crowd roared, their voices echoing through the palace walls. Then it was Nia's turn. She stepped forward, heart pounding, as the priest lifted the queen's crown. For a moment, doubt whispered in her mind. Was she truly meant to be here? But as she looked out at the people, the wounded, the weary, the hopeful, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the cool weight of the crown rested on her head, The hall erupted in cheers. Long live Queen Nia! The celebrations lasted for days, music and laughter filling the streets of Zalanga. Hope had returned to the kingdom at last. But amid the joy, an unexpected figure appeared, Mama Zara. Her once proud face was now humbled, her voice softer than Nia had ever heard. Nia, she said, bowing slightly. I was wrong about you, about everything. She hesitated, her hands wringing together. Can you ever forgive me? Nia studied the woman who had once belittled her, who had treated Malik with cruelty. She had every right to turn her away, but instead, she simply said, I forgive you. Still, forgiveness did not mean forgetting. She would not allow Mama Zara to hold power over her again. As the celebrations continued, Nia stood beside Malik, no longer the timid girl from a small village, but a queen ready to lead. As Nia stood on the palace balcony, looking over the bustling city of Zalanga, she thought of the girl she had once been. A simple village girl, underestimated and overlooked, taught to believe that power and status defined a person's worth. But now, she knew the truth. It wasn't the golden crown on her head, or the royal robes on her shoulders that made her who she was. It was her strength, her kindness, her unwavering belief in what was right. Malik joined her, his fingers gently intertwining with hers. You're quiet, he said with a soft smile. What are you thinking about? She turned to him, her eyes filled with warmth. How much has changed, she admitted. How I never imagined this life, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Malik studied her, a deep admiration in his gaze. You were always my queen, Nia, even before you knew it. Her heart swelled at his words. It had never been about royalty, about titles or riches. Through every hardship, through every moment of doubt, their love had remained strong, not because of who he was, but because of who they were together. The kingdom of Zalanga flourished under their rule. No longer did the people live in fear. No longer did injustice reign. With Malik's wisdom and Nia's compassion, peace and prosperity spread throughout the land. And in the quiet moments, when they walked through the city streets, when they laughed under the stars, when they ruled side by side, Nia knew the greatest lesson of all. Love was never about status. It was about trust, resilience, and standing beside the one who saw your worth, even before you did.